Hello, welcome to Dimensional Analysis. In this example, we're going to be using time. Before I get started on any of these, I wanted to go over the general equation that I use for dimensional analysis. And in my instance, I like to use given over 1. I use that 1 as a placeholder. That's technically something you don't have to do, but I really highly recommend it so you keep your numbers in order. And you're going to multiply that by your rate. And I'll just put rate on both sides here. And then on the denominator, what's really important to notice about your rate is that you're going to want to use the unit that is going to cancel with the given, right? That's why I have that in green, right? It's going to be your canceling unit, right? The one that you want to get rid of that's also here as well, okay? And then on top, you want that rate. I'll put that in a different color. This will be your desired unit, okay? So you can take this time to write this into your notes. Put it in a safe space. I'm going to keep this on the board as long as I can until it gets in the way of these other questions. So that way you can at least see me have it as an example. At the meantime, I'll put it here on the bottom right. Right? And this may not only be just two. This may not be only two instances of fractions. All right, so number one, how many hours are in 2 days? So the most important thing here to try to identify is which is going to be your given. Now, rates are always going to be identified by seeing things like like miles per hour, meters per second, dollars per unit, something like that. Rates are always going to be identified. So anytime you see like something that's standing alone, like a value that's standing alone in its unit, it's not attached to anything else or it doesn't cause anything else to occur, that's going to be your given. In this case, it's going to be 2 days. All right, so 2 days over 1, so that's our given, okay? And then now we want to multiply it by our rate. And in this case, we see that the unit we want is hours, right? So we want hours on top. It's not always going to be the case, but what we see here is that it is going to be in one step here, because what we know is that in 1 day there are 24 hours, and what we see here that's working with us perfectly is that day cancels out, right? And you're left with our desired unit, which is going to be hours. And so that tells us that we're actually done. All we have to do is finish multiplying our numerators, which is going to be 48, and what we're left with is hours over 1, which is just simply 48 hours. And that way you're done. Let's take a look at something that has more than one step. Right? Here what we see is how many minutes are in 3 days. You can pause it to try to identify your given and maybe try to identify what is going to be your next unit for rate, or what's your next fraction for rate. So this is 3 days. All right, that's going to be our given. So we see it's 3 days over 1. Now, we want to get to minutes ultimately, but unless you have exactly how many minutes are in 1 day, which is not very typical, this is a good time to think about the closest thing we can do, which is going to guide us, or use our denominator to guide us. And in this case, we see it's going to be days, or have to be on the bottom of this next fraction. It has to be because it needs to cancel out with this day, right? And what we see is 1 day, so I'll just get rid of that S so it's more like formal, all right, is 24 hours. All right, so you can see how it looks similar to the top, but we're not done because our unit on top now is hours and we no longer want hours. All right, what we're looking to get is our desired unit is minutes. Right? So what we see is, let's write another rate fraction here. Now, what unit is going to have to go here on the bottom? That's the main question that's going to guide you for the rest of these transformations. And what we see is hours is the only unit left on top. So that tells us that that's what we want to cancel out. Okay? And we think about hours. What's the next smallest unit for that? And that's going to be minutes. And what we know is that 1 hour is 60 minutes. And now, right there, what we see is that minutes is our desired unit. We see that hours is canceled out. And now what we can ultimately do is multiply all of our numerators. All right, so what we see is 3 times 24 times 60 is 4320. 4320. Only unit left over is minutes. All right, and that's going to go over 1, right? Because all those units have been canceled out, ultimately leaving us with 4320 minutes. Okay, so let's go ahead and pause the video again and go ahead and take a attempt here at number 3, and let's see if we get the same thing. All right, so here we go, number 3. How many seconds are in a week? So what I'll say is, we'll say that let's just actually get real. Let's get real formal here. 1 week over 1, right? And that tells us that our next unit, the denominator here, needs to be what unit? It's the one that's going to cancel out with the one above in the previous fraction. And 1 week has how many of something else that we know is directly below it or directly smaller than that unit, and that's going to be 7 days. All right, and they just keep this pattern going. We know we're going to use days here because that's what's up here. So far, week and week have canceled out. And in our rate, we see that we'll have 1 day. I keep doing that. 1 days is going to be 24 hours. And then we'll make our next rate. And when we're waiting to get to seconds. That's another thing we want to keep in mind, is what is it that is the unit that we're attempting to get to. So we're pretty far out still because we're at hours. I don't know how many, let's see, we have hours here. So I'll say, all right, we have 1 hour in the denominator, so that's going to cancel out with that unit at least. Hours. Days has also been canceled out. But okay, in 1 hour, we want to get to seconds. I don't know how many seconds are exactly in an hour, so I'm still going to stick with minutes here, 60 minutes. And then our final fraction will be minutes on the bottom. 1 minute is going to be 60 seconds. And then now what we see is all our units have perfectly canceled out, and we have ourselves the unit of like that we were looking for. And all we have to do is multiply to get our final answer. All right, which is going to be, let me get this out of the way. Ooh, it's in the way hardcore. All right, 1 times 7 times 24 times 60 times 60. And that's going to give me 800 seconds, which makes sense. I mean, we're talking about how many seconds are in a week.